I didn't buy my ranch to live under someone else's thumb. When I signed the deed to my lakefront property, I made sure of two things: no bank could touch it, and no neighborhood busybody could control it. I had 20 acres of freedom, woods, water, and enough land to stretch without hearing a single lawnmower from a neighbor. That was the dream. But freedom always attracts the envious. The so-called homeowners association didn't even cover my land. Their bylaws ended 3 streets back, in a cookie-cutter subdivision full of folks who thought perfectly trimmed hedges and beige vinyl siding meant power. But that didn't stop them from trying to stick their claws into my property. It started small. Letters. Petty warnings. The first envelope arrived folded neatly in my mailbox. No return address, just a printed sheet telling me my dock was not in compliance with HOA standards. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the letter into the water. Their standards. My dock was older than their subdivision. My grandfather built it with his bare hands, driving cedar posts into the lake bed before most of these people were even born. Then came the threats. Failure to comply will result in fines. Your vehicles must be inspected by HOA security. Unregistered watercraft will be removed. I didn't bother replying. You can't reason with parasites. For weeks, I shrugged it off. I had more important things to do: fixing fences, splitting firewood, keeping my cattle fed. But the HOA didn't like being ignored. Ignoring them was like pouring gasoline on their fragile egos. And that's when they decided to escalate. It was a Saturday morning, clear skies over the lake, mist rolling across the water like a living thing. I was out on the porch with a mug of coffee, boots propped up on the railing, watching a hawk trace lazy circles above the tree line. Peace. Silence. Exactly why I bought this land. Then I heard it, the crunch of tires on gravel. My driveway stretched a quarter-mile from the road to the ranch house, lined with oaks and hickories. You couldn't mistake the sound of someone rolling up uninvited. I set my mug down, squinting as a pair of black SUVs crept through the trees like wolves. They had the HOA logo slapped on the doors, cheap vinyl stickers meant to look official. Security, they called themselves. I called them trespassers. 4 men stepped out. Black boots, black uniforms, mirrored sunglasses. They strutted across my yard like they owned it, not even bothering to shut the SUV doors. One of them, tall and broad, barked, "You the property owner?" I stayed sitting, calm as could be. "I am." "And you're trespassing." The tall one smirked. "We're here on HOA business. Got a complaint about unauthorized structures. You're in violation." That's when I set my boots on the deck boards and stood up slow. I wasn't a small man, and the way their smug looks flickered told me they realized that quick. "This land," I said, pointing at the dirt beneath my boots, "isn't under your jurisdiction. You've got no authority here. Now get back in your tin cans and roll out before I call the sheriff." They didn't move. Another one stepped forward, cracking his knuckles like he wanted to play tough guy. "Look, we can do this easy, or we can do this hard. HOA wants compliance, and we enforce compliance." I chuckled. "You boys think you're cops?" Silence. Just a stare down. 4 men against 1. And yet, somehow, I felt like I had the advantage. See, there's a thing about living on land your family's worked for generations. It gives you a backbone. A fire. And if someone tries to strip it from you, you don't argue, you don't negotiate, you stand. I let them stew for a second, then spoke low. "Last chance. Leave." The tall one made a mistake. He reached out, trying to shove me back with a hand to my chest. That was the moment it all changed. I moved quicker than he expected. My hand clamped his wrist, twisting until his smirk turned into a grimace. Before he could yank free, I stepped forward, driving my boot into his shin with a crack that echoed across the yard. He collapsed, screaming, leg buckling like a snapped branch. The others froze, unsure if they should jump in or run. I gave them my answer. The scream of the first guard carried across the lake. It wasn't just pain, it was surprise. He never thought some lone rancher would fight back. I still had his wrist in my grip, bent at an angle wrists weren't supposed to go. His sunglasses had slipped off, revealing eyes wide with shock. "You think you're the law?" I growled. "Out here, the law starts with me." I let go, shoving him to the dirt where he clutched his shattered shin, rolling like a hog in the mud. The other three shook off their hesitation. The one who had cracked his knuckles earlier charged first, swinging wild with a haymaker punch. He was big, sure, but big doesn't mean smart. He telegraphed it like a neon sign. I ducked, grabbed his belt, and used his momentum to send him tumbling across my porch railing. He flipped over it and landed flat on his back in my flower bed, knocking the wind clean out of his chest. The third one tried to be slick, circling to my left, reaching for something at his hip. Not a gun, looked like a baton, telescopic steel. He flicked it open with a snap and grinned like he finally had the upper hand. "You just made a mistake, old man," he spat. "Funny," I said, cracking my knuckles. I was about to say the same thing. He lunged, swinging low at my knee. I sidestepped, grabbed the baton with one hand and yanked. He didn't let go fast enough, so the force twisted his shoulder. He screamed as I drove my elbow straight into his shin, hearing another crack. His leg folded, and he collapsed into the dirt beside his buddy. That left the last one. He hadn't moved yet, standing by the SUV with his arms crossed. Watching. Calculating. The type who liked to let others do the dirty work before swooping in to finish things. He finally stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "You've assaulted HOA security," he said coolly, pulling a knife from a sheath on his belt. "That's a felony. We're taking you in." I almost laughed. "Taking me in? Son, you couldn't take in groceries." The knife gleamed in the sunlight. He twirled it once, trying to show he had training. But when he came at me, it was sloppy. Desperation always is. I sidestepped again, grabbed his wrist, and twisted, the same move I used on the first one. His grip faltered, the blade slipping free. Before he could recover, I stomped down on his shin with all the force of a sledgehammer. Another crack. Another scream. 3 men, 3 shattered shins. They all writhed on the dirt, groaning, clutching their legs like children who'd never been hit before. The one in the flowerbed finally staggered to his feet, limping, gasping for breath. He half-dragged his buddy with the baton toward the SUV. We'll be back," he hissed through clenched teeth. "Bring a stretcher," I called after them. "And maybe a lawyer while you're at it." The tall one, still rolling in agony near my porch, was left behind for a moment. His team scrambled to haul him up, half dragging him toward the SUV. They piled in, doors slamming, engines roaring. Dust and gravel sprayed as the SUVs tore back down my driveway. I stood there, breathing steady, watching until they disappeared past the trees. Only when the sound of their engines faded did I take a deep breath and sip the last of my coffee. Still warm. Not even ruined. That was when it hit me, this wasn't the end. HOA types never stop at one loss. They lick their wounds, gather their friends, and come back harder. And I knew, next time, they wouldn't just bring 4 rent-a-cops with cheap sunglasses and batons. They'd escalate. The war for my lakefront ranch had just begun. The quiet after they left felt heavier than the fight itself. My porch creaked beneath me as I sank into the rocking chair, coffee mug still in hand. The lake shimmered like nothing had happened, birds still singing like it was just another morning. But I knew better. When men like that crawl away humiliated, they don't forget. They come back meaner, louder, and with backup. Sure enough, 2 days later, the letters returned. This time, they weren't stuffed in my mailbox by some HOA volunteer with too much free time. These came certified. Official envelopes with a notice of legal action, stamped in red across the top. I opened the first one at the kitchen table. It read like a declaration of war. Failure to comply with HOA directives will result in fines, liens, and forfeiture of property. HOA reserves the right to secure enforcement through legal and physical measures. Liens. On my land. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. They couldn't put a lien on something that had never been under their jurisdiction. My property line was older than their subdivision's bylaws. But that was the thing about these people, they thrived on bluffing. Most folks folded when threatened with enough paperwork. Not me. That night, I walked the perimeter of my ranch, lantern in hand. The woods creaked with cicadas and owls, the water lapped against the dock. My boots sank into soft earth as I checked the fences, the gates, every choke point where a vehicle could push through. I wasn't just defending land. I was defending a piece of history, a place my grandfather carved out of nothing. By the time I made it back to the porch, I had a plan. First order of business, prepare for another visit. I reinforced the front gate, welding extra steel across the posts. Dug trenches near the tree line, so no SUV could barrel straight through without snapping an axle. Second, tools. I wasn't about to brandish firearms unless it came to that, but my land held more than enough weapons if you knew where to look. Shovels, fence posts, hammers, and a solid hickory axe handle that had been in the family shed since I was a boy. Third, surveillance. They liked to come sneaky, trying to catch me unaware. Not this time. I mounted trail cams along the driveway, strapped another to a tree overlooking the dock, and kept one on the barn. If they tried to creep up again, I'd see them before they saw me. But preparation wasn't enough. I needed leverage. The next morning, I drove into town. Sheriff's office first. I sat across from the man himself, an old friend who'd known my father before me. His eyebrows arched as I laid the HOA letters on his desk. They sent muscle out here, he asked, voice low. Not just muscle, I said. They came onto my land, laid hands on me. I defended myself. They left crawling. He studied me for a long moment, then leaned back in his chair. They've been pushing folks hard lately. Trying to stretch their reach beyond the subdivision. But they've never been dumb enough to mess with you. Until now. Guess they thought I'd roll over, I said. He chuckled. They picked the wrong rancher. The sheriff promised he'd file an official record of the trespass. It wasn't much, but it was something. A shield in case the HOA tried spinning the story their way. But I didn't trust paper shields. Paper doesn't stop boots on gravel. By the time I drove home, clouds were rolling in, thunder grumbling across the lake. The storm broke by nightfall, rain hammering the tin roof, wind shaking the shutters. I sat at the window, watching sheets of water blur the tree line. And somewhere in that storm, I swore I heard an engine. Slow. Creeping. I grabbed the lantern, slipped on my boots, and stepped out onto the porch. Rain pelted my hat as I scanned the driveway. Headlights flickered once, then vanished. They were testing me. Watching. Waiting. I tightened my grip on the axe handle and muttered under my breath. Come on back, then. Let's finish this. The storm broke with morning light, leaving the land washed clean and glittering. The lake steamed in the cool air, mist rising like a veil. You'd think peace had returned. But I knew better. I didn't have to wait long. By noon, the sound of engines rolled through the trees again, heavier this time, deeper. Not 2 SUVs. Not 4. 6. Maybe more. The line of black vehicles wound down my gravel drive like a snake, kicking up dust and gravel, headlights blazing even in daylight. They weren't hiding anymore. I stepped out onto the porch, coffee in one hand, axe handle in the other. Boots planted, jaw set. The first SUV stopped 20 yards from the house. Doors opened in unison. A dozen men stepped out. Not the sloppy rent-a-cops from last time. These ones wore tactical vests, radios on their shoulders, polished batons, even a couple with shields. HOA's security force looked more like they were playing soldier now. At their center stood a man in a suit. Smooth hair, smug grin, clipboard in hand. He didn't bother stepping into the mud, just stood on the gravel like he thought it made him taller. You the owner, he called out, voice slick as oil. I didn't move. Already told your boys, I am. And you're trespassing. He smiled like a fox. You assaulted our enforcement team last week. That's grounds for legal action. But we're generous men. You sign over compliance today, pay the fines, remove the dock, and submit your property to HOA oversight, and we'll forget about your violence. The men behind him smirked. Some cracked their knuckles. Others tapped their batons against their palms. I took a slow sip of coffee, then set the mug down on the porch rail. You boys didn't learn the first time. The smirk faltered. This isn't a negotiation. If you don't step down, we'll remove you by force. I chuckled low. Then come try. That was the moment they moved. The first wave rushed forward, boots pounding the gravel, shields up like they were storming a castle. They hit the trench I'd dug across the driveway, and the front 3 went down instantly, legs tangled, shields useless, bodies sprawling in the dirt. The second wave tried to circle wide, cutting through the side yard. Their mistake. I'd laid fresh barbed wire low to the ground between the hickories. They hit it blind, yelping as the wire tore at their uniforms, stopping them cold. The third wave, the confident ones, came straight for the porch. One swung a baton down at me as he jumped the steps. I met him halfway, axe handle snapping up like a hammer. Wood against shin. Crack. He dropped like a sack of bricks, howling. Another came in fast with a shield, thinking he could ram me back into the door. I sidestepped, hooked the shield with the axe handle, and wrenched. He lost his balance and I drove my boot into his shin. Another scream. Another man crawling. By the time the dust settled, half of them were on the ground clutching broken shins, the rest scrambling back toward the SUVs. The man in the suit hadn't moved. He stood frozen, clipboard trembling in his hands, sweat streaking his forehead despite the cool breeze. You'll regret this, he stammered. We'll sue you into the ground. We'll. I cut him off, stepping down the porch stairs, boots sinking into the wet gravel. I stopped just a foot from him, looking him dead in the eyes. You think lawsuits scare me? I said low, calm. You think paper and fake badges give you power out here? My land isn't yours. It never will be. And if you, or anyone you send, sets foot on it again. I tapped the axe handle once against the ground. Thud. They'll leave crawling. Just like your men. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over his own polished shoes. We will see about that, he shouted, but his voice cracked. He scrambled into the SUV, slamming the door behind him. Engines roared, tires spun, and one by one the black vehicles fled my driveway, kicking up dust and leaving their fallen men to limp and crawl after them. I stood there until the last engine faded into the distance. Only then did I pick up my coffee, still warm on the rail, and take another sip. The lake shimmered calm again. My land was quiet. I knew they wouldn't be back. The HOA had learned it the hard way. This ranch wasn't theirs to bully. It never would be. And if they ever forgot, I'd be right here, waiting.